run a guess. Tonight, JD is not around, so just going to be me and Dan Williamson, and we have an awesome guest tonight, NFFC Hall of Famer Billy Wazowski. He's had unbelievable success in high-stakes fantasy football. He also is a contributor to the Black Book, and we're just excited to pick his brain a little bit tonight and get a chance to help you win your league in 2021. So welcome, Billy, into the GOAT District, and welcome, Dan, as well. Dan, how you doing tonight?
Oh, doing great. Ready to talk a little football. This is one of those days at work, that just kind of keeps getting crazier and crazier. So it was time to get off and let some steam out.
No, I hear you. And Dan and I have both been in leagues with Billy. Billy's my league mate in the New York Super for NFFC. An awesome league. I've also competed with him in the NFFC Classic, the NFFC Primetime. He is a very difficult player to play against. He always has teams that are competing for the title, and I'm really excited to get a chance to hear what you have to say tonight. Billy, welcome into the GOAT District.
I appreciate it, guys. I'm looking forward to this, and thanks for the kind words. You two are two of the best as well. You guys are always, like you just mentioned, you're always in every league as well, and you guys always put great teams together. And it gets harder every year. Like, people just come out of the woodwork every year that you never even heard of, and all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult than it used to be back when I started back in like the late '80s. So.
Yeah, it seems like the better we get, it's like all you're doing is kind of staying even with where you were in a lot of ways. It's just a race to not fall behind, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's much tighter these days. It's before, I feel like for early drafting, you could really find extreme values and just keep hammering them. But it's almost like the market's kind of corrected itself, and it's June, and it's harder to extract those values. Would you guys both agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that there's just so much information out there now. It's in social media and Twitter and everything else, and everybody's got the same information, and it's basically the people that can dive into it just a little more with a little more detail. And obviously there's a little load of luck involved in this too, but there's just a lot of information, so it kind of evens the playing field a lot more than it used to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I find it used to be that I could start drafting in June, and I felt like I had a pretty good advantage because a lot of people weren't caught up to me. And then it became May, and then April, and then March. And now it's like you draft in February, and by the time you get to the end of February, everybody who's drafting during that time period is already pretty well caught up to wherever you think you might be. So it just gets tougher.
Yeah, and when you get these June drafts, you know too many of the guys in the draft room, it seems like, and that's not always a good thing in the NFFC and the FFPC. So Billy, I know I was in a RotoWire online championship with you about a week ago. Are you doing a lot of drafts right now? Have you gotten started, or is this sort of you're just feeling it out at this point?
I've done a lot of best balls up to this point because it always comes down to how much can you manage when the season goes, and you try to limit them now. And like you said, pretty much the diehards are in right now, so it gets a little more weeded out, I guess you want to say, once we get to like mid-August, that range. But I think I've done about 4 or 5 managed right now. I haven't done that many managed leagues. I just did an auction last night online, which was fun. Those are always a good time. And done I think 5. Actually, I've done probably. See, I'm already over where I thought I was. I've done about 8 so far. So I've done. I do a couple online championships with a buddy of mine. We share them, and then I did the one with you. I've done 3 so far on my own. About 3 auctions. So yeah, I'm already up to 8. So yeah.
That's the same way I find myself. I'm constantly having to fight that itch. That's like no, do a best ball. No more managed leagues right now.
Yeah.
And because I got myself in trouble on Dynasty Depot with eating up a few of those orphan leagues and or orphan teams, and so I managed to acquire about 7 or 8 more managed leagues than what I normally have, heading into the redraft season. And so I'm a little bit committed on that. So I'm trying to hold back a little bit on the, the football guys and the online championships and that kind of thing, and save some of my bullets for Vegas.
Absolutely.
And Billy, when do you start really jumping into it with when you're drafting, multiple times a week? And is it after the 4th of July, or do you try to wait a little closer to August?
I mean, I try to wait as long as I can because, like Dan's saying, when you get to New York and Vegas, it's just a whole bunch of leagues, and you're going to have those. So you try to limit what you can early on. I do my first draft of the year literally starts the minute the Super Bowl is over. We call it Trendsetters. It's a great league. It's a best ball. Thankfully, we do it in phases, and it's a really good time. But I try to hold off as long as I can. I've actually done better this year than normal because normally by now I'd have a bunch of teams already. What the best thing is, because I'm a teacher and my wife's a teacher, we go on vacation in the summer. When I'm on vacation, I don't have to worry about it. I don't even look at what the room's filling up. Is it close to filling and that kind of thing. But I do a lot in August. Probably mid-August and on is when I start really picking it up. But I'll have probably 12, 15 teams by then.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, enough time to kind of get the feel for how you want to draft, and because best balls do that some, but there's what do you find are the biggest differences between the best balls and the managed leagues as far as like how you draft?
Oh, well, there's a big difference in those. I mean, I think best balls, you can get away. You can kind of try a lot of different things early on, in my opinion, in best balls, and you can still put a good team together. Because if you're good in those middle rounds, anywhere from like 15 to 25 or 20, and you can put a lot of people together there, you're okay. Managed league, it's more about. I saw a guy the other day. He did the first 7 rounds. He did not take a wide receiver in the NFFC. It was the managed league, and I'm just like. I don't know how that's going to work. When you got to start 3, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's the one that's one we were in, Billy.
I think. I don't even remember. It wasn't on. It was a managed league. It very well could have been. And he took 7. He took a quarterback, a tight end, and 5 running backs. And I'm just like, you can't play the 3 running backs. And you don't have 1 receiver yet. And then when you're drafting like 6 receivers in a row, and they're all the same guy. Good luck picking those guys out every week. So, I guess a best ball is more about quantity over quality, like, getting a bunch of guys, because you don't need, you don't have to worry about, the start, sit decisions and those kind of things.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. No, if anybody's listening, Billy's had fantastic success. He's a Hall of Famer in the NFFC. A lot of times we talk about FFPC with the tight end premium, 2 flexes. The NFFC is a 3 wide receivers you're starting every week, and you have a flex where oftentimes that flex is another wide receiver. So if you get behind with wide receivers, I find it just crushes your team. Would you agree on that, Billy, in that format?
100%. You can't come out of a NFFC league without some decent receivers. You just have to get them. I know there's people. Receivers a lot deeper this year. So they say, we always say stuff like that, and then we get to the season and we're like, oh my gosh, he's terrible and he's awful and then you look at your team and you're in trouble. So receivers are a big deal in the NFFC, and you really have to make sure you get some for sure.
Yeah, I always kind of laugh when people say, "Oh, receiver is deep," or "running back is deep," or whatever is deep, and it always is deep until all of a sudden you realize that there's still only 24 top 24 wide receivers every year. So it's in a way it kind of feels deep, but it never really is deep because it is what it is as far as like that top 24 or whatever. What you're hoping for if it's deep is that there's you go from like wide receiver 15 to 35 or something like that, and it's all pretty much kind of the same guy that you can kind of at least semi rely on, but even that doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, and just to kind of harp on what these guys said is, even in FFPC, I'm whenever I have a chance to get a top-notch wide receiver or a receiver with exceptional volume, it's really hard for me to pass them up. And I'm curious, your guys' thoughts on this, but it seems like the last few years, it's really hard to extract a lot of wide receiver value off the waiver wire. I mean, occasionally you get a league where maybe a Chase Claypool or a Justin Jefferson might be available if somebody dropped them, but that's kind of few and far between. It seems like last year it was Travis Fulgham, and that's pretty much it. It's really hard to find those guys. The Mike Davises happen every single year, but those top-notch wide receivers, it's just getting harder and harder to find them.
Yeah, and I think the running backs, they definitely have a more propensity to get hurt. And how many times have we seen, I can't think of a name off the top of my head, but they have a running back and they need one off a roster and they pick up some guy who was working at UPS and then he jumps in and gets 25 carries and he has value. I mean, a running back, and it's the easiest position to learn, one of the easiest positions to learn in the NFL, they hit the hole. I mean, and the receivers, when a receiver comes in, they're not going to be the number one target. Highly doubtful to become the number one target of the quarterback. They're going to be like third, fourth in pecking order. So it just makes a lot more sense. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is, like, when you talk about the flex, I mean, I've seen people do it, and I've done it on occasion. Sometimes you have to during a week where you have a running back at your flex or a tight end. But I mean, receivers are generally going to be your flex spot because they're just going to produce more overall. I mean, considering unless you build your team, again, I'm talking about NFFC rules with three really strong running backs, you can do it. But generally, I like to keep a wide receiver in my flex as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to, if you're going to go heavy on the running backs, you've got to have some receivers in the middle rounds that you feel very, very strongly about. They're going to pop. Because if they don't, you're probably going to be in trouble.
And one question, I'd like to hear from both of you guys on what are the biggest mistakes that you see drafters making, especially in FFPC, NFFC formats where you're holding 20 on a roster. What do you see, guys? Do you see guys ruining their team in the draft or the way they manage it? What are the biggest mistakes that you guys see?
Dan, you can go ahead on this first if you want.
All right. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ways to ruin a team, but one of the ways, the quickest ways to ruin it is, what Billy was just talking about, not really understanding the rules and how that relates to your scoring and your roster decisions and the kind of decisions you're going to have to make all year long. And you can tell yourself that 3 of these receivers I drafted real late out of 6 or 7 are going to pop, but usually that's not the case. And so you're just misunderstanding, what you need and how to build your lineup. And then the other thing I see a lot of times is, and kind of related to that, is just overindulging in one position, trying to, punish other people in the draft who, you decide they're not taking tight ends fast enough or something like that. So you say, well, fine, I'm going to grab, 3 elite tight ends. But it just ends up hamstringing you so bad everywhere else that it ends up not being worth it. So those are a couple of them. I'm sure Billy's probably got plenty more too.
No, that was pretty good summary of everything. The biggest thing, like you said, Dan, is people just taking a position over and over and over again, and they're not addressing their other needs. And roster construction it seems like a very simple, maybe to us it is, a very simple thing. I don't think it's simple for everybody. And, some people, they have a different approach, or they're going to say, well, I'm going to do totally something completely different. And sometimes, that works. I mean, we all get lucky sometimes, but for me, when I get to like round 12-ish in that range, I've generally had my, I got pretty much my starters set and I got a little bit of a bench. I like to go, I'm looking for upside because, and I want to do this every year and I say I'm going to do it and I always forget. I want to take my teams, or at least a few of them, and I want to see how many people from when I start on draft day, how many of those guys are left on my roster at the end, because I will bet like so many of the people from like 13 on, you're churning them constantly and you're moving them in and out and everything else. So, but for me, it's about picking upside later on in the draft. And sometimes people just don't. They take just standard players that, this guy's not going to really jump off the page. And I'm sure, maybe somebody looks at my rosters and says the same thing. Who knows? But, that's what I'm trying to look for. I'm trying to look for some upside. And, I think it's a new NFL now. It's a younger man's game. Justin Jefferson's a perfect example. I look back at the Super Board today Theo and, Justin Jefferson, I think we both passed on him in the 10th round or something. I mean, it happens. I mean, we didn't know at the time, but those are the kind of things that can win you a league. Just picking that one guy right there, and it can win the whole league for you. So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to like you said, hitting on some of those high upside guys. It's not necessarily even the rookies these days. How many drafts could we have all just taken Stephon Diggs in the 5th round when he fell to some 6th rounds last year? It's guys like Darren Waller, guys like Stephon Diggs. I mean, they really just, those league winners are so common across, champions in NFFC and FFPC. And yeah, it makes a massive difference. And go ahead, Dan, you were going to say something?
Yeah. I mean, you've got, just to kind of feedback on what you were talking about, there's only so many league winning players, and, what it really comes down to is how many of those you can get on your team. Some of them are going to come during the draft, but a lot of them are also just going to come, throughout the season, through waiver wire pickups and always staying active on the waiver wire, which, to Billy's point, is why you don't really want to, get one of those guys who's going to give you, like that floor, like maybe, I don't know, like a Gio Bernard, he could pop, but the odds are he might be more of a floor play. I mean, I guess it all depends on how you feel he's going to fit into that offense. But if you feel he's going to be just kind of chipping in like he was in Cincinnati and be a guy who's a real, like emergency stopgap, you might as well not take him in the draft, because you're going to be able to find those guys pretty much all season long. What you're looking for is that guy, if you think he's going to be the new, James White or something like that for Tom Brady, then that's where you want to say, yeah, I'm going to take Gio. So you could have, 2 people who have completely different ideas about what Gio is. One of them should be taking him in the late rounds, and the other one shouldn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think for me, over the years, I've tried to be a better drafter, and I think it's like Billy said, you want to have a lot of upside, but you can't be all upside guys. You've got to be able to balance. You've got to be able to have guys that you can plug in early in the season. I think a lot of mistakes I see is you have guys who are drafting every single handcuff, and that's kind of like how they're filling their bench. And I think that kind of hurts people a little bit, because it comes to week 4 and 5, you're starting to cuddle a couple of these guys you've drafted in maybe the 9th or 10th round, and it's kind of hard to catch up from some of those mistakes. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of ways to screw up your draft, and people make mistakes on the clock as well. I think that it's difficult to not draft in June and July a little bit, and then go up against a guy like Billy or a guy like Dan, who's been drafting, over and over again, and not, be comfortable when you're on the clock. Once in a while, you'll see a guy, maybe it's first time in New York, and, he struggles a little bit. I think that, even if it's just underdog drafts, get comfortable drafting, get comfortable making decisions when you're on the clock. How are you attacking the one-off positions, Billy? Do you have a general strategy on how you're attacking tight end, quarterback, even team defense, or do you kind of play it each team specific? Is it changing up, or is it a general strategy?
It changes up each draft. For me, the quarterback position is generally the position that I will take the quarterback when I don't like anything else. If there's, especially in the NFFC, when you're getting 6 points for a passing touchdown, there's nothing else I like. There's not a receiver, a running back. They all look the same, and I'm going to have a pick in like 5 more picks, and there's 5 guys on the board. I'm going to probably get one of them. Then that's where I might take the quarterback, or even the tight end. I mean, truthfully, with the tight end, it's Kelsey Waller for me, and then it's down. I mean, I'm not really interested in Kittle. I mean, I would take Hawkinson if he's in the right spot. And, I guess I shouldn't say it. Hawkinson, Andrews, I mean, Pitts is kind of in that. Pitts is starting to climb too much for me. But those guys are all in that one area too. The Goddard, Fant, who am I missing?
Yeah. Anybody in that tier, Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas, thank you.
Yep.
That tier, it depends where that is. And again, it's the same as the quarterback. If there's nothing there, then I'll take it. Where I don't feel like an extra receiver or running back is going to help my roster. but I don't really. I approach them all differently. If I'm at the back of the draft and Kelsey's there at 11 or 12, I'll probably take him because I just think that's a good pick there. I think he makes sense. Same with Waller if he falls to the third, but I don't reach for these guys at all. I'm not going to reach for either one of them. As far as the quarterback goes, rarely have Mahomes. If Josh Allen falls in the right spot, I'd take him. But other than that, that the Kyler, Lamar, Dak zone is a pretty nice place to be. Mm-hmm. But again, it comes down to the running backs, the receivers, what's on the board.
How about you, Dan? That's pretty much sounds a lot like you. With when you don't like what's on the board, you might attack that position with quarterback. And FFPC is a lot different for us with tight end. But would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't treat FFPC really any different as regards to tight end, other than I'm more willing to roster more of them in the FFPC. Just because I could use them, I could use up to 3 in my flex if I want to. But for the most part, in FFPC, I'm kind of the same as Billy. If I don't get one of those elite ones, I'm probably going to back way off tight end, and I might even back off even farther. I'm probably looking, to get down into the Grant, Troutman, Kmet tier like that, because I feel like some of those guys are probably going to do as every bit as well as a Goddard or a Logan Thomas or whatever. It seems like those guys in the middle, that you're drafting in like rounds 6 through 10, never perform as well as the equivalent wide receivers or running backs that you could get in that spot. So I tend to go either early or late on tight end. And like Billy, quarterback is the one you take when you feel like you're stuck for where you need to go and there's still a good quarterback. Then that's the easy tiebreaker. You take that elite quarterback. Last year it was really tough to win leagues if you didn't have elite quarterback play. I noticed pretty much all of my league winners and the league winners on leagues that I didn't win, pretty much every league winner had some kind of great quarterback play going on, whether it was Josh Allen or Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, guys like that were just absolutely critical to getting that good score every week, and especially through the playoffs. So that was, like if you had Russell Wilson, you were great early in the season, but your team probably fizzled down the stretch. So you've got to find a way to continue those big quarterback weeks all the way through the season.
Yeah, I think that's a great point by Dan. I had a couple of teams last year that maybe were like 9-4 type NFFC teams that really just lacked a top-notch quarterback. I waited on quarterback on some of those teams, and it was really hard to play catch-up. You might have 2 great running backs and two great wide receivers, but you'd be going up against some of these Josh Allen types, and you're at a 40-20 disadvantage to start out with that one position. So yeah, I think regarding the quarterback position, I think that the market might be correcting itself a little bit. I think that some of these guys are they're not falling. I think that people are more willing to take guys maybe in the 6th round that might gone in the 8th round a couple of years back. So I wonder if this is a year where the hit rates might be stronger on late round QB, or those Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Lamar tier guys. It's really an interesting debate, and I think you can build teams kind of both ways right now. And I just want to harp back on one thing, Billy, because you're not the only sharp player that's had some apprehension about George Kittle this year. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
I've seen a couple people rank him as the number 2 behind Kelsey. And for me, it's I think Darren Waller is just a beast. He's a beast. Derek Carr loves him. The whole thing in San Francisco too, we don't know what's going to happen with, whether it's Garoppolo or Lance and who they're going to lock into. And let's be fair, George Kittle, Kelsey's, knock on wood, he's as healthy as it comes. Waller stays healthy. Kittle does not. Kittle does not. And to pay that late, the NFFC, you're paying like a late 3rd. Sometimes he slips to the 4th round. There's just better receivers there and running backs that I'd rather take a shot at. That's pretty much what it comes down for me. He's a distant 3rd. Let's put it that way.
But he's your tight end 3 at this point, or is it kind of up in the air for you with the other guys you mentioned?
He's my 3, but he's not far ahead of Hawkinson. Let's put it that way. Hawkinson's pretty close. It's tight, and it would not shock me at all if Hawkinson had a better year than him. Wouldn't shock me one bit.
No, I'd agree on that. And then while we're on tight ends, what's you mentioned you thought Kyle Pitts was going a little too high for you. What's your thoughts on Pitts this season?
I'm generally not, especially rookie tight ends, and I get it. There is more hype on him than you can even it's like Calvin Johnson hype at the tight end position, and I realize he's probably not going to be a true tight end, lining up on the line and everything else. He's probably not going to block at all. He's probably going to play a lot more receiver, so he's going to have some options. I do admit 100% he's probably going to get 100, 110 targets, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe even higher than that. I want to see it, I guess, more first before it happens. And he's not a guy, in the NFFC, he's going, I think, early 5th, somewhere in that ballpark. It depends what's there again. If the receivers I really like are there, because I'm kind of picky at that term. If the receivers I like it, if they're not there, yeah, maybe I'll take a shot. And I'm sure I'm going to have a share or two of him, but I'm just not as I'm probably not as enamored as everybody else. And all I think it's going to take is some preseason games where he takes a swing pass or something and takes it 80 yards down, and he's going to shoot up to the 4th round or the late 3rd, and that's just going to be a little too rich for me.
Yeah. With Hawkinson, I think he's one of those guys who, if it plays out like I think it will, he's going to work a little bit better in the FFPC format anyway, because I think he's probably going to have a lot of volume but not so many touchdowns. And in the NFFC, I'd rather get those touchdowns, and I'm a little bit less concerned about the receiving volume if the touchdowns are flowing. But in the FFPC, when you get that extra half point per reception, and that's where a lot of people kind of fall down on the FFPC is they over prioritize the touchdowns, and they don't pay enough attention to the receptions that the tight end's getting. So you get like a guy like Tanyan last year. Wasn't as good in the FFPC as you'd like to think that he was, because he just, his score was depressed compared to some of the other tight ends because he was only getting, 1, 2, 3 catches a game, versus a tight end who was getting, 5 or 6 catches a game. That really, if he didn't get that touchdown, he was in trouble, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had this conversation with, another player who I really respect today, actually. And I kind of come around on Kyle Pitts. I really like him. I wish I had a little bit more of him. I have a lot in Dynasty, but in redraft so far, I haven't been able to get him. But what it really comes down to me is in FFPC, you've got to be willing to take him at the 2-3 turn, which is it's just too much for me at this point. You'd be passing on AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, guys like that in order to take, Pitts, and, that's just too hard for me to do. I think if I can get him in the middle of the 3rd, I think that's good for me, but it's just not happening. He's starting to go higher and higher. And I think he's a player this year where there's so much buzz that no matter how much you like him, someone in your league likes him more. So it's he's definitely a difficult player to gauge right now. Like Billy said, in regards to the targets, I'm with you. I think 100 to 125. But if I'm off and it ends up being 135, 140 targets, then he could win league. So it's a really hard player to gauge right now. But again, it's just I can't take him over DK Metcalf. Even if I'm wrong, I just can't do it at this point. So it would just make me sick. So it's definitely one of the more interesting players we've seen, ever in fantasy. I mean, a rookie going this high at a one-off position. It's very exciting. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
No, real quick. What I was going to say is, it sounds like in the FFPC, he doesn't have a big spread. He's like you said, he's around that 2-3 turn. I mean, NFFC, I've seen him go with the 3-4 turn, and I've seen him last till the 6th round. In the draft I was in, I was like in the middle to end. I was pick 8 in the 6th round. He went at pick 6-5. Now I would have taken him there. Like that's different, but that's a huge spread. I mean, that's just there's a big gap, so he's all over the place right now.
See, I just don't understand how he goes in front of Hawkinson, in the FFBC, because again, I think Hawkinson is in a role where he should see a lot of volume, given the turnover at wide receiver in Detroit, and and he's also got he's into his 3rd year now, so he's starting to really put things together, whereas Pitts has got to he's got to get the position figured out. He's going into an offense that already has some established receivers. I have a hard time imagining that Pitts is going to have more targets than Hawkinson. And even if he can be more efficient than Hawkinson, which maybe he can, maybe he can't. But I mean, it's not like Hawkinson is a terrible athlete in his own right. So, I just have a hard time seeing anything other than Hawkinson having a pretty bad year and Pitts having an exceptional year for Pitts to actually outscore Hawkinson, and for the fact that he's going in front of Hawkinson all the time in the FFPC. Are you seeing in the NFFC, Billy, are you seeing him go all the time in front of Hawkinson, or is it kind of a little more back and forth there?
It's pretty much, I would say 90% of the time he's going ahead of him.
Wow.
And I'm with you. I'm with you on that, Dan. I mean, I'm just going to take. I think T.J. Hawkinson was drafted 9th or 10th overall.
I think he was maybe even 8th or
higher
maybe
than
8th.
I mean, we're not talking about some slouch here. I mean, he was a very good player. Has great pedigree. He's got the tools. He's got everything you're looking for in a tight end. Now, the quarterback thrown to him, that's a whole different thing. But
right.
I agree 100%, Danny. I think he's going to get a ton of volume in that offense just because of the lack of receivers they have mainly. Mm-hmm. He's just going to be a big target for Goff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll take a neutral position. I think there's a chance they both hit very well this year. I think this is a year where obviously there's going to be situations where it doesn't work out based on the draft, but it's a year I would like to have a top tight end. I think it's going to be an advantage again this year, and I think that Hawkinson's going to have 135 plus targets, and I think he'll have a very, very good year. There's hardly any competition for him among the wide receivers there. I mean, one of those guys is going to end up being useful, but there are a bunch of Jags in Detroit right now. So yeah, I think Hawkinson could absolutely hit, and Pitts could. What is your take on this rookie class as a whole? We have a lot of dynasty listeners, Billy. I'd love to hear your take on some guys that you think are going to hit this year, and maybe a couple guys that you just are very bullish on their careers. We had Chris Vaccaro on the show earlier in the offseason. He had said that Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts were two of the best prospects he's ever seen at their positions. What are your takes on this class? Is there any guys that really stand out?
So Chris went out on a pretty big limb there, is what you're saying.
He absolutely did, and this was in regards to this is before the I believe this was before the draft, correct, Dan?
I think it was after, but
okay.
It was not long after. So we were still kind of feeling our way a little bit, but yeah, those players were they're pretty safe bets.
Yeah, no, obviously I was just joking around. Chris is obviously a phenomenal player. But Chase and Pitts they're generational talents from everything we're seeing. I mean, if I just went down by position, like a quarterback, the guy that I'm most intrigued by, I mean, I think Trevor Lawrence will be good. I do think Trevor Lawrence is going to be fine down the road. But out of all the quarterbacks, Justin Fields is the one that I'm really keeping an eye on, just because of that. I mean, he's got the whole package. He's got the rushing ability. He's accurate. If they can just build some things around him, maybe get Matt Nagy out of town would be really great, because then they could really let him loose. I think that'd be fantastic. He's the guy that I think, and again, I don't play Dynasty, but he would be a guy I would be targeting. I think he's got a really bright future. The running backs, for this year, I'm not sure how you guys feel about him. I'm a Steeler fan, by the way, but I am not a Najee Harris fan this year. Not where he's going. Let me put it that way. I think he's going to like 8th or 9th, 10th overall. I have him down at like 15, 16. He's down there a little ways. And my reasons are the Steelers' offensive line is horrendous. I mean, it's bad. And I just don't trust Ben Roethlisberger to stay healthy this year. And when he's not healthy, you either got Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins, and neither one of them inspire a whole lot of confidence. And now I will say this about Najee: he's going to get volume. There's no question about that. He stays healthy, he's almost a lock for 300 touches in that offense. Just going down the list, ETN's exciting. He's very exciting in that offense with Trevor there, and how they want to use him, and he's playing receiver and all this other stuff. He could be exciting. James Robinson, I can talk about him a little later. Javonte Williams, that's one I think down the road could be very good. But this year, I am worried about Melvin Gordon. I don't think Melvin Gordon's just going to go away. I think it's going to be a little more resistance than we think there, and I think it could be more of a 50-50. And by the time you want Javonte, it might be a little bit too late. Maybe your team, I don't think he's going to be great early on, and I know he has a great schedule out of the gate. And then the two other guys, the two other running backs, Carter and Sermon, they're like rocketing up the boards, and they're both guys that I like a lot. I mean, I think Trey Sermon could be really special if they just gave him the gig. We know Shanahan likes to shuffle in running backs. I don't trust Raheem Mostert at all, so I'm a Trey Sermon guy. And Michael Carter's obviously he's receiving, and for running backs, it's all about opportunity. I mean, it's getting the opportunity, and he's got. If he can beat Tevin Coleman and Michael Pirine out, which shouldn't be too difficult, I think he's got a nice future as well. Receivers, other than Chase, Devonta Smith, I'm not as high on Devonta Smith as other people are. I'm a little worried about Jalen Hurts there with his passing. I think he's going to run a lot. I think Jalen's the type of guy, much like Lamar was his first year or second year. He rolls out, he doesn't see anybody 5 yards open, which doesn't really happen in the NFL, and he's going to take off and run, which he's an athlete. He's athletic. He can do that. I do think Devonta Smith's going to be the target. I mean, he's going to be the guy in that offense. I just don't think he's going to be as good as where people are taking him right now. But I think during the future, as long as he can stay upright, I mean, what is he, 170 pounds? I mean, he's a twig. But one of my favorite receivers, and I know you're a fan, Theo. I love Rondale Moore too. Rondale Moore is he is the ultimate weapon for that team. When they took him, oh my goodness! I mean, it's like the perfect complement for Kyler. You get Rondale, and you got AJ Green there, which I think AJ Green will be a good veteran presence there for them. And of course, you have Hopkins. I mean, Kyler's set up for a good situation this year, and I think Rondale could be really special down the future. And at tight end, other than Pitts, it's just Pat Freiermuth, who I think is going to be excellent. He was fantastic. He's a great blocker, which is what the Steelers need. But I think he's a little underrated as a pass catcher too. And I don't think it'll be this year, of course, but I think down the road he's going to be a decent tight end for Dynasty.
Just one other player you didn't touch on. Your thoughts on Elijah Moore?
Well, everybody else's thoughts are he's like the greatest thing since sliced bread right now. I mean, he's another one. He's just getting so much hype. It's like you're getting to the point where you're going to be drafting him at his max. I mean, I think he's got the potential. I mean, again, he's in a situation. There's no clear-cut alpha there. Corey Davis could be okay. I mean, he should be okay. I mean, I still like Denzel Mims. I think Denzel Mims is a very big, good talent. Just something's not translating there. They brought Crowder back, which was really that kind of – I thought that would dampen the Elijah Moore hype, and it didn't. It hasn't at all. People just kicked Crowder to the curb, and, Elijah Moore's the guy. So I think he could be good, though. I mean, from everything I've seen, he's pretty solid.
I will say I'm very happy that I loaded up on Elijah Moore very early in the draft season, mostly before the NFL draft. And then for, about a month afterwards, he still really hadn't ticked up that much. And then once rookie minicamp started, that's when he really started ticking up. And, it was kind of nice to be in a position where I could slack off and just let, other people chase him on up. And I've already got a pretty good exposure to him. And then, we'll see where his ADP goes. I mean, it might dip back down again later. And if it does, he's somebody I'd get back in on. But where he's at right now, he's a little bit tough to draft, I think.
Yeah. I really would have liked to seen Rashad Bateman go to a different team, a team where if he could have gone to, like, I know there were rumors of Kansas City. I'm like, oh, please, that would be beautiful, because I think he could have been really, I do think he's a great receiver. I just think he's in the wrong spot. I mean, Baltimore's like where receivers go to die for the most part. So,
yep. Yeah, I mean, it's like putting Arnold Schwarzenegger on a starvation diet, telling him to go out and win a weightlifting championship. It's just not going to happen. He's just going to be too starved for targets, I think, unless that Baltimore offense changes into something that just, nobody really thinks it's going to be. So
I'm just thinking about how we'd be drafting Rashad Bateman in the 6th round right now if he was a Chief. We'd be going nuts. But I mean, Elijah Moore's interesting.
Like 4th round.
Absolutely, yeah. We'd be convincing ourselves on a lot with him right now. But yeah, I mean, Elijah Moore's interesting. It's I can see both sides of the coin. I think that people are getting him because I think he's going to have a role, and I know that it's kind of a crowded wide receiver situation, but to me, he kind of stands out as a guy with maybe the best profile. I think Corey Davis is a very good NFL player in terms of, like, he's a very good blocker. He's a capable receiver. They paid him a lot of money, but he doesn't scare me, as a wide receiver one. I think Elijah Moore could be good, and I think that, when people were getting him like Dan was in the 11th round, I think that is absolutely going to pay off. Whether he can pay off at an 8th or 9th round value, which is where he's heading, that'll be interesting. But I do like him a lot. And yeah, I'm with you, Billy. I think Rondell Moore, I've been taking him in the 12th round as a target of mine. Like you said, when you get to that back half of the draft, you want to swing for upside, and the guy certainly has that. I think he's a guy that's going to get manufactured touches, and I think the fact that AJ Green and Christian Kirk are around, it kind of depresses his value a little bit. I think that there's a scenario where Rondell has a really good rookie year, and I think that he's a guy I want to have on the back half of my roster for sure. And yeah, I think that it's a perfect landing spot because they'll play for a wide receiver all the time, and he can play the slot. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Getting back to just the draft so far, with regards to this current ADP and just the drafts in general, do you have a favorite structural build of how you've been attacking these drafts? Do you like your teams when you go running back? Do you like your teams, like you mentioned, you took Travis Kelce when he's there around 11. Do you think that there's a formula, or is it something you're going, draft specific?
It's draft specific for me, and a lot of it depends on where I'm at in the draft. What position I have. Like if I start with the 1 and I have McCaffrey, I'm a lot more daring to just say I'm taking McCaffrey and then I'm going to blast 4 receivers out in a row and just load up. Now that strategy would have been horrible last year because McCaffrey went down. And the best teams I've ever had have had 1 stud running back and 4 receivers, 4 really solid receivers on them. So I will do that strategy a lot when I can. I have a very hard time. Passing on the elite wide receivers. And what I mean by elite, I'm talking about like the top 5, going down to like Ridley, Devontae Adams, even the situation with Rodgers right now. Ridley, Adams, Hopkins, Diggs, and Hill. I have a hard time passing on those guys in the 2nd round for like running back 10. So I generally will take those guys, but I've drafted a couple teams and I went running back because the receivers are pretty decent once you get to the 3, 4, 5, even the 6th round sometimes. So it all depends. I don't really have a specific build that I try to do. I try to stay as balanced as possible, especially when you're in a tougher league. I think when you're in a league with it's a little more loose, I think it's best to stay balanced because it allows you to take certain positions where, if you already have 3 running backs and a 4th one just falls in your lap, it's really hard to take them when you need receivers and a tight end and a quarterback. So for me, I like to try to stay as balanced as possible, but I know the strategy you did whenever we drafted a week ago. I loved what you did there, and I've done that strategy plenty of times, and I hope it works. It's because I've done it too. It's a tough hoe because you got to get those running backs right. But if you hit those receivers and the tight end and the quarterback, if all you need is a little bit of luck. I did that 3 years ago in the New York Super. I did that. I didn't take any running backs early, and I hit James Conner in the 11th round. Well, there you go. I mean, and that's what people do. I think a lot with that strategy is they do that. It's hard to hit James Conner in the 11th round all the time. But I love the strategy. I've done that plenty where I'll just say, I'm taking 4 receivers. I'm just taking 4 right out of the gate. I don't care. I'm just going to do it. But generally, I try to stay as balanced as I can just so I can take certain positions if they come to me and I don't feel like I'm strapped. Because, if you take 4 receivers and then something really good falls to you in the 5th and it's like, oh, my gosh, he's sitting there. It's hard to start your team with 5 straight receivers. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm not a 0 RB guy all the time. I mean, but when it presents itself, I'm not afraid to do it. I think that in that particular draft, I'm picking in the 11 hole. I'm not trying to finish 5th, so I'm trying to go for max upside with that build. And I think if you're willing to take on a little bit of risk with that build, like you said, if you can hit on a couple of these running backs, then that team is going to be a monster. If I don't hit on any of them, then I'm finishing, well behind the pack. But I'm also more apt to do that if I'm in a draft with guys like you and Nelson Sousa, where I want to take some shots and I want to give myself the chance. I don't want to go up against running back 1 and running back 7 with running back 12 and running back 20 and just kind of try to play catch up every week. So I think it's an interesting way to do it. Have some of your very successful teams in the past, do you recall, how the builds, or is it it pretty much changes every single draft?
Yeah, I mean, some of the best teams I've had, they generally started with I had in the FPC in 2013, I finished 2nd overall. And I had Jamal Charles. That was his monster year when he had 70 catches or whatever. But I know I had Josh Gordon, and I didn't have a good tight end that year. I remember that. No, sorry. Yes, I did. I had Tony Gonzalez. My bad. But I had
pretty good one.
Yeah, he was very good. He actually won. It was a Monday night game, and I was sweating it out, and I got 2nd. I jumped from 4th to 2nd. That was actually the year that Dwayne McFarland had 2 teams in the top 5. He had teams 3 and 4, and I had 2. And if Sean Coots, the guy who won it, he changed his lineup 5 minutes before. He switched from the Arizona defense. He took Arizona's defense out and put the Patriots in. And Joe Flacco threw 2 pick sixes, 2 in the last 2 minutes. Had he not changed it, I win the $250,000. But that's a tough beat. But it happens. I was happy to win the I think it was $40,000 at the time or something. It was nice. It was good. But going back to what you were saying is the receiver. Generally those teams have 1 quarterback, and then I think out of my next 5 picks, I'd probably have 4 receivers. So it was just loading up on that 1 running back, and then trying to throw the darts at running back 2. And I think I had Joik Bell, which, if you remember Joik Bell, he wasn't horrible the 1 year. He was okay. I mean, he had his moments, and he was a fine number 2 with everything I had. And the other thing that I've learned too is, drafting sometimes after the Thursday game can be very beneficial. I drafted. That was the year that Peyton Manning threw the 6 touchdowns against the Ravens. And I don't know if you remember this. Eric Decker was the only player on the the Broncos who had a horrible game. He dropped the touchdown pass, and he was going early 3rd round. He fell to the 5th. And the people's reactions to that game are just baffling to me. It's baffling. I mean, but most of my builds generally are 1 strong running back with the stud 4 receivers. And again, it doesn't always work, and but historically those are my best teams.
Yeah, when you can get people in drafts who are taking Peyton Manning, 1st overall, 2nd overall, 3rd overall, on the basis of 6 touchdown passes. I mean, yeah, it's nice to win week 1, but you have to play the rest of the season too. And Decker was such a value.
Yeah.
Do you have a preferred draft slot, or are you comfortable drafting in a number of positions right now?
I'm comfortable wherever, and that's what I do love about the NFFC is you do have a say in it. At least you have a choice. So far, a lot of my drafts, I've not had very good luck. I'm choice order 9, 10. I'm like, I'm hoping it changes because I don't know if you remember for the New York Super last year, I was last out of the hat, which I got my last pick, and that was okay. It worked out for me. I did okay, but so for me, it really doesn't matter. I think you can make a build from anywhere. It's all about that. I really don't focus on the first player as much as I do. Round. I kind of try to see where the pockets are and where people are falling. And it's about comparable players, and you're only hoping for one guy to be there. You don't need two or three. It's just when everybody gets sniped in front of you, and then you're like you said, you got a minute to figure it out. And the people who've done it before, they're calm about it. They can do it. But I don't have a preferred draft slot per se. Not right now. It's hard for me to tell. I don't mind the back. It's kind of 3RR. You get that early third round pick, and I think there's about 27 players I like. So anywhere 12, 11, 10, you're going to get 3 of those guys anyway right now. So.
Yep. Dan, do you have a preferred slot right now, or you kind of
in NFFC? Yeah, definitely. I like the back end. Or if you can't get the back end, I'll take the 1 or 2 slot as well, because it's pretty tough to mess up the draft if you're starting off with McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook, and if they play like we expect them to play, you've got a huge advantage on that first round pick, and most likely, and then you just need to be solid in your second and third rounds, and you're going to be just fine. But as Billy said, I mean, there's you can build a good team from anywhere, and it just is a matter of practice, and also just looking at other draft boards and seeing what other people are doing, and using that to kind of help you figure out what it. Like I had a draft from the 8 slot that I didn't particularly love, and then after that, I'm looking at other drafts, what were people doing in the 8 slot, that was different than me. I got some ideas. Oh yeah, here's some different ways I could build that are going to make a little more sense than what I ended up with. So just being able to learn as you go and get plenty of practice, or at least be reviewing plenty of draft boards so you can see what's possible. That way you don't, as Billy said, sometimes you get, you have 3 or 4 targets lined up and they go bang, 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 bang right in front of you. And all of a sudden you're like scrambling around. You got to figure out, what am I going to do? And you've got 60 seconds to do it. So it's a lot easier if you've been doing it before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I obviously I like the 1-2 spot. I especially like it in FFPC, but in NFFC, I'm not afraid to have that run with the third round reversal. But NFFC, I'm a sucker for the back end. I like to have that early third round pick. I think you can build a real monster that way. But I think that if you do get stuck with one of the middle of the first round picks, the one great argument to it is you won't ever miss a run. You're kind of right there every round. So I think that, with all these leagues, your draft slot ahead of time, and I think it gives you time to prepare, and there's different ways to skin a cat, so to speak, in drafting. And I think you just need to get comfortable drafting in any particular spot. Here's kind of a real specific question. A lot of people are going to ask you, what do you think of this guy, and how do you attack these rounds? But how do you build a bench? Is there a particular way you want to build your bench structurally? Are you looking for those top-notch handcuffs? Do you like to carry a second quarterback? Do you have some philosophies on how you like to have your bench in these NFFC teams, Billy?
It all depends. Every draft's going to be different. It depends on what I started with and what I have from there. I mean, there's certain players. I'm not a huge handcuff guy. There's certain guys I would do it. Dalvin Cook is definitely one of them. If I had Dalvin Cook, I'm getting Alexander Madison, because Dalvin Cook. I mean, I don't know the last time he's played 16 games. I don't think he ever has played 16 games. But it's nice to have somebody like that. Kamara and Murray's a good one too. There's a few of them there, here and there, but I'll normally, my bench is just generally, like I said, a lot of it's going for upside. It depends on what I have. I took Cam Akers the other day, and I'm not a huge Cam Akers fan. I don't know. I think there's just other guys I like more, but I made sure I got Darrell Henderson. That's and I like Darrell Henderson anyway by himself. But I'm trying to answer the question the way when you wanted me.
No,
I
mean, pretty much anything in regards to a bench. We're just trying to pick your brain on this one. So,
yeah, I mean, it depends every draft. I don't have a specific strategy when I go in. I generally am a guy who I take what falls to me. So if something's there and it's a guy who I'm like, I'm kind of off on it. You mentioned earlier about Pitts. If we're wrong about Pitts, people are going to benefit from that. And there's guys where I might not like them per se, but I'm like, let me take him this draft. So sometimes I'll take some shots, and I do enough teams I can do that. For somebody who's doing one or two teams, I think it is beneficial if you have to cover some of your players. I generally do take a second quarterback just because I got burned so bad on Dak last year. And that just it stings. So and I did it last year too, but you're taking Dak and we took Goff. I'm like, oh, Goff will be fine. No, Goff's not fine. So I do take a second quarterback, but I think a lot of the things with the second quarterback, I think you're going definitely for upside on those guys. You want guys who can run. Obviously, this is turning into obviously the NFL is turning into a quarterback. It's a running. You want running quarterbacks. So if you can get one of those guys that run, that's definitely beneficial. Like I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is a great backup this year at all. I want a guy who can run. So.
Yeah, and to your point, Billy, I also had a couple of NFFC teams derailed by Dak and not having a good backup. And I think in the NFFC, it's a lot more important to have a backup and a good one than it is in the FFPC. In the FFPC, I can pretty much always find something on the waiver wire. In the NFFC, I find it's more like, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, you can almost always find a starter, but you're going to be bleeding a lot of points at the quarterback position most weeks if you're scraping around that bottom of the barrel in the NFFC.
And I've tried sometimes to take, even like you look like 5 weeks out and you have three guys and you just say, oh, this is a great matchup for them. And this is a great matchup for them. I found it just normally doesn't work. Just stick with the one guy that's your guy. Don't try to get cute. Just don't get cute. Cause I've done that before and I try to beat the system and it just doesn't work. Like you said, Dan, especially in the NFFC, with that 6 points, you're going to get crushed if you don't have a decent quarterback. It's just you're giving up so many points every week to somebody else, and you're really behind the eight ball.
Yep, tough to make them back for sure.
Yeah, I think Billy brings up a great point. Is even the sharpest guy, even the analyst that you think is the best at predicting things, it gets so difficult when it comes to streaming quarterbacks. It's really hard to pick between, two guys and, maybe their quarterback, 10 through 14 type guys and continually pick the right one. The NFL, things do not always go as you plan, and it's difficult. It's definitely difficult. Just getting back to this, do you like to carry, other people's handcuffs and maybe, a couple third down backs? Is there specific kind of value guys you're looking for on your bench, or is it just kind of value as it comes?
It's value as it comes, but I kind of mix that up a little bit. I like Devonta Booker this year. I mean, Barkley's, obviously he had all his injuries, his injury last year, and while he looks great right now, not that Devonta Booker is going to be a league winner. I don't think he would be, but he could definitely be serviceable if you're going to be using him, something like that. So sometimes I'll look at some of the starters that I just don't feel really as comfortable with, that I wouldn't want on my team, and I'd say, hey, well, if they have a backup who can pretty much do it all, and you like to get guys that at least can catch the football. Like you don't want guys that just are plotters and aren't going to catch the football at all. You want somebody who has a little bit of upside to them. But I will take some third down backs every now and then, like a James White or a Gio Bernard or something like that. I think it's not a bad thing to have on your roster if you need it in a pinch. I certainly wouldn't want to rely on it for a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, because I just don't, James White, not James White 3 years ago or whatever he was 3 years, he was phenomenal. But generally those guys that don't get any carries and are just specific role players where the third down backs, they're not the guys that I normally go after. I'm normally looking for somebody that could have a little bit bigger of a role in the offense.
Dan, how about you? Is there a way you've been you attack it with your bench, or are you just trying to, like Billy said, kind of mix it up with value and upside guys?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd like to, if I have my ideal draft, I have 2 running backs I feel real good about. I feel good about my wide receivers, and I feel good about my flex or flexes, depending on which format we're talking about. And if I've got those, then a lot of what I'm going to do in the later rounds is just trying to hit home runs, and get that upside. If I'm less confident, like I don't feel real good about my running back 2, or I don't really feel like I have anybody that I feel real confident in for my flex, I'm more likely to take guys who might, kind of slide up to that role, but maybe not exceed it. Just to have 1 or 2 more options, early in the season while we're trying to figure things out. Because, a lot of times early in the season, you're still trying to figure out exactly, what your base lineup is going to be, at least on the back end of that roster. And, and I also like to have some guys where I'm going to know real quick what's going on with them, like if I'm not sure about a guy's role, and I can get him cheap, I'll go ahead and grab him. And then I look in week 1, and if I see him getting touches, then I'm probably going to hang on to him for a couple weeks. But if I see him, pulling an Eno Benjamin last year, just to, name a player that a lot of people were on and who did, nothing. I mean, he got 0 touches after 1 week. That tells you what you need to know. Drop him and move on to somebody else who is getting touches. There's no sense hanging on trying to wait for Benjamin to get his first 3 touches in week 6 or whatever. Just doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of the way I like to play it. I do like getting other people's handcuffs if it's a clear handcuff. For me, the handcuff thing is Billy kind of alluded to it, but you want somebody who's going to be a strong handcuff that you feel real confident is going to get the job and run with it, rather than somebody who's just kind of going to get thrust into that role by default, because those are the guys you really worry about, that they're going to get, either the touches are going to get fuzzed out, or they're just going to simply get replaced by, a street free agent or something, because they're just not happy with how things are going. So I try to stay out of those kind of handcuff situations.
Yeah, I think that you both had great points. Billy, on Devontae Booker, who's actually somebody we've talked about here in the GOAT District for months now. If you don't believe Saquon is at full health, which a lot of people don't, then how is he not a guy you're adding on your roster? I mean, even in these drafts that we're in, he's going in the 18th round. He costs you absolutely nothing. And if we're wrong, you can cut him. And I think that one lesson that I learned last year is I want to look at guys that are not necessarily the trendiest handcuffs. Everybody wants to have Tony Pollard. Everybody wants to have Lat Murray. A lot of people love A.J. Dillon, but those guys cost you a lot. But if you look down and you identify these guys like a potential Mike Davis that would receive very similar volume to the running back they're replacing, I think those are great value guys. And if you analyze the Giants roster right now, it's Devontae Booker. If Saquon's out, Devontae Booker's going to get 15 plus touches every single week. So I think that's a great one. I think you can identify other guys like that. And then with regards to a point that Dan made about the NFL coaches don't tell the truth, but week 1 we find out so much. I think week 1 is almost always the most valuable waiver wire run, and I think week 1 is also a time where people maybe might ignore the volume and just kind of say, oh, it was week 1, it's going to change up. A lot of sharp waiver wire people a lot of sharp players hit the waiver wire after week 1 and were able to get Myles Gaskin for maybe a 5% bid, a 3% bid, definitely less than a 10% bid, and they got a running back who had about 10 or 11 usable weeks, Dan. I think that that week one, it cannot be overlooked. Week one tells us so much. It's a lot of times it's time to abandon ship, and a lot of times it's time to grab those guys off the wire. The best waiver wire guys of the last couple of years, the DJ Sharks, the Terry McLaurins, those guys hit week one, and people better paid attention. So I thought that was a great one. Both great points from both of you guys. Getting back to a dynasty specific question, and it touches on redraft, Billy. You mentioned Cam Akers. We've talked about Jonathan Taylor. This sophomore running back class is just so loaded. How do you look at that group of guys for this year in redraft, and how do you look at these guys, for their careers? Specifically the Clyde Edwards-Hilairs, the Antonio Gibsons, the Cam Akers. How do you view that class right now, Billy?
So if you kind of just go in order like ADP down the list, Jonathan Taylor is, he'd be the first one. And, there's a lot of people who love Jonathan Taylor. I've seen Jonathan Taylor go number 2 overall in drafts. Not dynasty drafts. I'm talking just managed leagues. He's going number 2 overall. And there's a lot to be excited about. He was phenomenal at the end of the year last year. He's got a great offensive line. He's going to be the guy. There's some people worried about Marlon Mack. I get that. I don't think Mack's going to take a ton from him. I still think they have a lot invested in Taylor. They know what he can do. He had a phenomenal catch rate last year. I think he dropped 2 passes or missed it's like 43 or 46 or something ridiculous. So he can catch the football. Yeah, he's fantastic. He's probably like the top guy. Antonio Gibson's a real big buzz guy. I would love Antonio Gibson if I just knew that toe was fine. And the toe really concerns me. Just because anytime there's a foot injury to any player, especially a running back or receiver, that's a problem because they can't run on it. But if that toe is better, Antonio Gibson's got oodles of upside. What was amazing to me last year is they just did not really throw him the football nearly as much as they could have. That was his thing at Memphis. In the NFFC, he was a wide receiver. That was his designation.
Right.
So, that's how good he was, and they really didn't do it. But he just picked up the running game just like that. And with that line, Washington has a really good offensive line. They got a great defense. It all falls into place. So I think those two would be the two that are the ones you really going forward. I like CEH a lot this year. I liked him last year. He kind of was disappointing. He wasn't awful. Like people were making him sound like he was just this huge disappointment. He was a disappointment when you took him in the top 5 after, top 5 or 6. Then he was a disappointment. But if you got him earlier and he was in the 3rd round, he wasn't awful. He was disappointing, but he wasn't like a total strikeout. I think he could be solid. I think DeAndre Swift, talent-wise, is up there with all of them. If he could be the top of the crew, quite honestly. I think he's got a great opportunity. My biggest concern with him is his concussions. I do worry about that. That one he had last year, I think it kept him out 3 weeks, which generally doesn't happen. They might have just been playing a little safe with him as well. I'm a big J.K. Dobbins guy. I like him. Let me finish this. I'm a big J.K. Dobbins talent guy. I think he's very talented running back. I think he's a great wide receiver. I think he's a great receiver, but they do not use him in the passing game at all. And that's a big – it's just – I remember a play last year was in training camp, and he went over top this linebacker, and he was parallel to the ground. He plucked it right from him, and I'm like, this guy's amazing. But then they didn't even throw to him, and I just think he's in the wrong situation with Lamar running, and you got Gus Edwards there and everything else. I wish he was in a better situation because I really do like J.K. Dobbins' talent, and maybe it'll come through this year. I think he's due for some touchdown regression based on how many times he scored last year. Akers is the one I'm not 100% on. I do like the Rams offense this year with Stafford. I think the defense is solid. I think they're going to be ahead in a bunch of games where they're going to salt it away, but they're going to put Darrell Henderson in. I think the difference too is, Darrell Henderson is a pretty capable backup where I don't put Marlon Mack or whoever Washington's even going to have. Truthfully, I haven't even looked out in detael on Washington. Is it Peyton
Barber, depending on?
Yeah, okay, so there you go. And CEH, you got Darrell Williams, and these guys don't earn that place. Darrell Henderson is a decent running back. He's solid, and I think he's going to take a little more than people think away from Akers. So I'd be a little concerned with him. That's pretty much all of them, I guess. Am I missing it? Well, James
Yeah.
Robinson. James Robinson. I mean, I think what he did last year was phenomenal. The problem is they don't have any capital involved in him. You got a brand new coaching staff, and you just drafted a running back in the first round who you have a lot of draft capital in. So James Robinson in the right spot, when he falls to like the 7th, sometimes 8th round, when he's in the 8th round, yeah, he's a buy for me. Even in the 7th, he's a buy. But when he's in the 6th, there's always somebody else there that I want. And I look at him. It's kind of like you were saying earlier, Theo. You were talking about how I don't want to be playing with running back 26 and trying to compete with somebody. So you might as well build it up somehow another way. So that's pretty much on the running backs, the rookies. Or excuse me, second year players.
So Taylor would be your pick to have the best career of those guys?
I think so, only because of his pedigree. I mean, he was really good, and I think he's got a really great situation. That offensive line is fantastic. It's the best of the group. CEH and Gibson, if they start catching a lot more passes, for fantasy wise, I think they could be right there with him. Swift is just on a really bad team, unfortunately. But I think Detroit's their line's no slouch now. With sending, they got Poole from Oregon. They're not bad either. So I think Taylor would probably be the best one. I don't know how they rank in Dynasty. I'm sure Taylor's up there. I'm sure
Taylor's up. Yeah, Taylor's. If there's a Dynasty startup tomorrow, Taylor's going in the top 3 in a lot of these startups. So he's looked upon in the Dynasty community as a running back people have great confidence in. And then so would you have a so Swift would kind of be your guy in terms of if you had to pick a second back in this group for
as far as
long
talent wise.
Yeah,
I like Swift. I mean, if they could build something in Detroit and put some offense around him where he could be the guy, I think he's fantastic. I think he's a great running back. He's got great vision. He's got everything you want. He can catch the ball. And I don't think I think a lot of people are down on him. I know there's a lot of people that really are down on him this year in redraft. And in fact, I know the draft we were in together, I did take him in the 3rd. And I think in the 3rd round, as your 3rd pick, I don't mind DeAndre Swift. I have a hard time taking him with my 2nd pick, but with my 3rd, I can live with that. I mean, I think he could be okay.
No, I'm with you. I think that he's a 3rd round value. It just like we talked about with Hawkinson. I think that even if Jamal Williams is getting work, which he very well could, Swift is going to catch a ton of passes. So it's going to be hard for Swift not to produce at a high end RB2. I would imagine. And he's got upside for more. Dan, I know you're big on Gibson. Is Gibson for you the number 2 in this class if you're looking long term?
He's right in that conversation. I mean, I think Taylor is still my number 1. Dobbins on a different team, would be, like if you could put Dobbins on like a half a dozen other teams than Baltimore, he would be right in there for number 1 or number 2. With Gibson, I think he's probably the most likely to ascend to number 2, just because of the fact that we didn't really know what he was going to be when he came in as a wide receiver. We didn't know how he'd make that transition to running back, and as it turned out, he made it just fine and a lot quicker than what I expected. I mean, I thought it would take most of the year for him to kind of figure out how to run from the backfield that much. And it really didn't. And as Billy said, he wasn't even getting that much of the passing work. So, and then you look at this as the system that, pumped out Christian McCaffrey. And, Gibson has a lot of the same abilities as McCaffrey. And McCaffrey wasn't really used that heavily in his first year, especially, in that all-purpose role. He was splitting time a lot more as Gibson was. But, it's a difficult transition even for running backs to the NFL. A lot of times they're not going to, coaches aren't going to put the entire running game and the entire receiving tree and pass blocking and everything else on their plate at once. They want them to, master a couple things first, and then they'll add more the second year. So that's why I look to get that second year leap out of Gibson. If his toe is fine, and I know there is question about that. I'm, I guess, probably a little bit less concerned than Billy, or at least I better be, because I've been grabbing Gibson just everywhere all the time. But anyway, yeah, he's just one of those guys I think he has the upside that, if I'm trying to pick somebody from the round 2-3 turn that could be, the 101 or 102 next year, I think Gibson would probably be that guy. And I'm not sure if some of the guys in between there really have that much of a shot. I mean, I guess if everything happened just right for Akers, he could maybe get there, but it's pretty tough to see otherwise. So yeah, I'm pretty high on Gibson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Taylor one. I'm still a sucker for Swift. I love Swift long term. I think that it's going to happen for him there. I'm hopeful it happens this year. I have him on a couple of dynasty teams, and I will have him on some redraft. But you never know in year two. And yeah, I mean, Gibson is just the possibilities this year. I think that even if you have some apprehension about Gibson, he's the kind of guy that if you have enough fantasy teams, you're going to want to roster some because the upside is absolutely there. I mean, he had 11 touchdowns last year, and then I'll credit Evan Silva on this one. He had 77 out of 77 touches at Memphis. He found the end zone 15 times. So I know we're not allowed to say guys have it's not like analytical or smart. It makes me sound like a meathead to say that guys are natural touchdown scorers, but the guy gets in the end zone all the time, and I don't think we can discount that. So, I will have some Gibson. And back to what Billy said, I think that Cam Akers is an interesting one. I think where Billy took him in that second round, I don't think he can hurt you, but I don't know if he necessarily has the upside at ADP like some people think right now. It kind of seems to me that the Rams are going to be a passing attack, based on all the moves they made. And Billy made a great point on Darrell Henderson. I know Dan has spoken highly of him in the past, but Darrell Henderson is the kind of guy that's going to have, if he's healthy, he's going to catch 40 passes. So you're already taking that out of Cam Akers. So yeah, I have some apprehension there. What's your guys' take on? I'm just curious what your guys' take is on Matt Stafford right now. Is he a guy you could see taking in drafts? I'll start out with you, Billy.
Yeah, no, I think there's easily a path for him to be a top 10 quarterback, top 12, whatever in that range. The only apprehension I have with him is he came from Detroit, where he was throwing all the time, and he had to throw. They were always behind. The Rams have that defense. When you got Aaron Donald and you got Jalen Ramsey and whatever else happens, we've seen games where they just jump out on somebody. Is Matthew Stafford going to have to throw a lot in the second half of games? I'm not saying every game, but you understand what I'm saying. There's going to be some games I think he's just not going to have the volume where he's not going to have to throw. Now he could he could have 4 touchdowns in the first half, and that's great for fantasy. But if they run a few in, or if they get some defensive touchdowns, they might let off a little bit. So I'm not really going after Stafford. I agree 100% what you said. I think they brought him in to unleash the passing offense, and I think the receivers will do well. I think obviously ADP. You got Woods and Kupp; they're going pretty high. They're both pretty much 4th rounders now, and rightfully so. They're great receivers, but I do worry that there's going to be some games where he's not going to have to throw as much, definitely as much as he did in Detroit. Because I'll tell you what, Matthew Stafford for a few of those years was the king of garbage time. He was fantastic in the fourth quarter. He would put up 2-3 touchdowns. He would get you 150 yards in the fourth quarter, and you come back from the dead, your teams were done, and they're like, oh my gosh, So I don't know if we're going to see that as much in LA.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because back in those years, when you had Detroit players on your team, you just didn't even want to turn on the game until about midway through the third quarter. Because you knew they were going to have 3.7 points and but then all of a sudden the fireworks would start erupting because, the other team goes into the prevent defense and there you go. But let me throw it out real quick before we get all the way through this podcast. We need to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors, the FFPC. We've talked a lot about Dynasty. We've talked about Redraft. We've talked about Best Ball. You want a platform where you can play all of those, and they're a lot of fun. the FFPC is definitely a great spot to do it. And all of us really enjoy playing on the FFPC. What I like is that, you also have a great variety of price points too. So it's, it's one of those places where you can get in and kind of learn it at a low level. And then as you improve, you can, start leveling yourself up to higher levels. And, I think they've done a really, really good job of that is to being pretty approachable to new players. So if you haven't given them a try, definitely get out there. And if you're looking to get into the FFPC dynasties, check out the Dynasty Depot, because these guys have teams for sale all the time. They've got orphans. Some of them are great. Some of them are terrible. They're everywhere in between. But, you can find good deals at basically every price point. You can find really good teams that are actually selling for a reasonable price. You can also find really good teams that are selling for a humongous price. We've seen a few of those, but you can also get some super cheap teams, and you can flip teams on there pretty quick too. You can get a team for $50, and within a year you can be selling it for $500 because the FFPC system allows dynasty teams to kind of turn around just that quickly. And so if you know what you're doing and you grab the right team with the right pieces on it, you've got a great shot. So there's a lot of good stuff at the Dynasty Depot. A lot of fun. They have some of their own competitions as well, as far as like who can turn around the most teams or the best teams, and some pretty good prizes there too. So jump in there and check them out.
Okay. So just getting back to it, quarterback position. We just touched on Stafford. The last few years, you kind of had a couple of these league winning guys that maybe weren't in the top, 7, 8 drafted. Josh Allen last year, correct me if I'm wrong, he was about maybe quarterback 7 off the board, quarterback 6. So he went a little bit higher, but he had great win rates. Aaron Rodgers went a little later. He had some great win rates. Is there anybody that you two guys are seeing at this point that besides the big, let's call them the big 6 quarterbacks, is there a guy a little later that you think has, real league winning potential, or is it still up in the air for you guys?
Dan, you want to take this one first?
All right. Yeah, I'll jump on this one. One thing I really like doing if I miss out on those top quarterbacks, and this fits real well with talking about Stafford, is, if I've missed out on the top quarterbacks and I've missed out on Brady, I like Stafford kind of the best of, the rest of the non-running quarterbacks. And so I'll take him as kind of my baseline quarterback, and then I'm going to go fishing for upside later on in the draft, whether that's Fields, whether that's Lance, maybe even Tua, but I'm gonna look for one of those quarterbacks I think can pop from further on down on the draft board. And Stafford is a guy who can kind of be a placeholder for a while until I see what's going on. And it also gives me an opportunity, if I need to, I can switch gears and pick up somebody else if all of a sudden there's a hot waiver wire quarterback, that's come out of nowhere for some reason, which doesn't happen every year, but a lot of years, we even as much as in fantasy, we have the quarterback position probably figured out better than any other position. And every year we're still surprised by some of the quarterbacks that come out of the woodwork. So, there's often a guy you can grab if you're early in on him, in the first 3 or 4 weeks, and get him for a pretty decent price. So, if I need to take a Stafford or somebody and go fishing late in my draft or go fishing on the waiver wire, I don't mind doing that at all.
I think what you said, Dan, about the going fishing for the quarterbacks you mentioned are exactly the 3 that I go fishing for as well, because they present so much upside, and that's what you want for those out of your second quarterback. The 2 that stick out to me that I think right now would be going past, and I guess we're talking about past like Justin Herbert, Tom Brady-ish, that range. Yeah. The one that I thought was going to get a jump, and he did early, and now he's falling back, is Ryan Tannehill. And I'm really surprised he has not risen just a little bit more, because I think right now he's a value. Just adding Julio just adding Julio, take Julio, replace him for Corey Davis. Yes, they lost Johnny Smith, but you guys, Josh Reynolds, Ferkser, I think could be very serviceable this year. And the beauty is with Tannehill, he is a runner. He will run. I mean, I think he had 7 touchdowns, which I don't see that happening again, but I think he's going to be solid. And the other one, as long as everything checks out with his knee, is Joe Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow's got it. He's got it all set up for him this year. I mean, he's got 3 fantastic, arguably the best group of 3 receivers in the league. Pittsburgh, I guess, would be in that as well. You could argue. I'm probably missing somebody, but anyway, the Bengals, when you have Chase and you got Boyd and you have Higgins, and then you have Mixon out of the backfield. I mean, they're just missing a tight end is all they're really missing for him to have just a full complement. I'd like to know that if he can run well, that would be a big factor, because if he can run well, I think he could be fantastic this year. So those would be my 2.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think Burrows it's potentially a great situation, especially considering his ADP, where you can get him outside of the top 12 right now, which I think is great. But like you said, I think he had maybe 3 rushing touchdowns last year, maybe 200 yards on the ground. So if he loses that mobility, I think it'll hurt him. And also, that offensive line has to be a little bit better, you would think. But that mobility will help him stay out of trouble. But yeah, the guy had what was that game last year? We had like 70 attempts, and it's certainly setting up for him right there. And then just getting back to a guy you touched on earlier, Jalen Hurts. A lot of people are in on Hurts this year, and you seem to have apprehension. It's more of an accuracy thing with you, or is it's just you don't like the offense? What's holding you back on that one?
Nothing's holding me back from, if we were talking about him when you mentioned. I know when you mentioned, you said something about after the top 6 or 7, and he's not in that. But then you said the non-running quarterbacks.
Okay, yeah. Oh no. So just your opinion on him then.
Well, I mean, I'd like to see. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience throwing the football in the NFL, so we got to see first. I mean, he's definitely a guy. Like, I was doing projections, and when I first was looking at it, just based on some things, it wouldn't shock me if he had 1,000 yards rushing this year. Like, that's who he is. And those guys are valuable. But it'd be nice if he had some, they did add Devonta Smith, which is a weapon. He has Goddard, he has Sanders out of the backfield and Gainwell and all that. It should be okay. I'm fine with him. I am. I'm fine with him in that group. I think with the Burrow, the Tannehill, the Stafford, that whole group is there kind of after, and Brady are in that group after your big, 8, 9, or 6, or no, sorry, about 6 or 7, like you said.
And
who do you like out of that group? I'm sorry, Theo. Who do you like out of the group?
So for me, I've been finding myself drafting quarterback a little earlier this year. So far, I'm sure that's going to change as I do more drafts. And I have liked taking Brady. I think Brady's kind of like that right in the middle of a higher upside guy. And I know it's hard to think of Brady as an upside guy, but I think that if with those 3 wide receivers, they return 22 starters to Tampa, I think maybe he's not priced as correctly as he could be. I think he could throw for an absolute ton of touchdown passes. And then, if I get stuck and I'm going late, I like the idea of grabbing a Stafford or a Burrows and following it up on the back end with a Lance or a Fields, where I have potentially a high upside rookie. I've in FFPC drafts, I've added Lance actually to a Brady team, just because he was value there. I know we haven't discussed Trey Lance, but I think if he does take over that job with those weapons in San Francisco and his running ability, I think he's like a top 12 option as soon as he's in the lineup kind of guy. So I've liked taking Lance. And again, Lance you can get him in sometimes like the 16th round, 15th round. So I'm very bullish on Lance. I think I'll have him on a lot of benches. And like you said, I mean, Justin Fields, his weapons are not bad, and he's got a lot of ability. I loved him at Ohio State. So I'm with you on a lot of those guys. I think it's an interesting year for quarterback, because the top quarterbacks look good, and then we kind of have a kind of a good handle on on the middle guys, and I think there'll be some interesting team builds, and I'll be interested to see who's winning the main event, who's winning the classic, and where they attack the quarterback position. I think it'll be very interesting this year.
Yeah.
One more thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
No, real quick. I had a team I just drafted a few weeks ago, and I took Herbert in the 7th, and Brady fell to me in the 11th. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, and I normally don't take my backup that early, but I'm like, there's always a couple teams in the draft that just sit back and they're like, wow, nobody's going to take a backup. And I'm like, screw this. I'm like, I'm taking Brady. I'm like, I'm not letting Brady fall to this guy. And, plus he's just great at, and you can play the matchups with those two. If there's a great, with Herbert and Brady, if you can hit it right, I'll probably mess it up, but that's okay. Because I've tried this game before where you do this with like, I have 2 stud quarterbacks, and you look at these matchups, and they, like you said, Theo, the NFL, you just don't know what's going to happen. We can say we think we know, but we don't know. So.
Yeah, and weird things. It'll be like game flow. Like the Chargers will jump out 24-0, and you think you're going to have 50 points. And then the second half, they take the air out of the football, and you're sitting there just all frustrated. So many things can happen. And then we're almost reaching the end of the show here, but I wanted to get your thoughts on going back to your general strategy, the waiver wire. Are you a guy that finds yourself spending your money early? Do you like to spend a lot on one guy? Is there a strategy you've had over the years, or is it pretty much something you like to mix it up?
It's all team dependent. If I need a receiver and I'm desperate, supply and demand, I mean, I got to get somebody. So that, or, it comes down to where, like somebody did drop Justin Jefferson last year in one of my auctions. And I already had, I think I had Robinson, Metcalf, and Woods on that team. And I think I had Judy. I think I had some decent receivers, but I'm like, it's Justin Jefferson. So I unloaded the chamber. I went like $700 on my 1,000, and I had it, and oh well, and it paid off because he was fantastic the rest of the way. But a lot of times I'm the guy who has the most money at the end because, and a lot of that depends on if you're healthy or not. If you have a team that's just ravaged with injuries, you got to hit the waiver wire. If you have a team that has great bench options already and they're already there, you don't need to touch that. And there's nothing better than having the hammer come week 13 and you have the most money and that prize guy that's going to lead somebody to the championship and nobody can outbid you. There's something nice about that. But it's all team dependent for me. Teams that are ravaged, I try to, I never give up on a team. I don't care if it's my worst team. I've had teams, that it just didn't work. I drafted poorly. I had injuries, whatever. It doesn't work. And I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to keep churning. I'm going to keep trying because I just think that we all hate the guy in the league who doesn't put a lineup in, and the guy gets a free win, and it costs you something along the ways, and it's the worst feeling in the world. So, it's all team dependent for me. But I will, at certain spots, it all depends what I need. If I need somebody, I do like to stream defenses depending on what I have. I'll look ahead to the schedule, and I don't mind. I'll spend a little more on a defense because if my team's solid and everybody's healthy, I shouldn't have to spend that, anywhere else.
How about you, Dan? Do you have a general philosophy?
I mean, I try to. In actual fact, I tend to go a little bit more on the David Hubbard system, which is, basically that money is burning a hole in my pocket, and I got to get rid of it fast. It's not the best way to do it, but no, seriously, Billy's right on. If you don't need to churn, don't churn, because you're just blowing fab that you don't need to be spending. If you've got decent enough guys, there's a lot of times where you can say, well, yeah, but this guy on the waiver wire just scored 2 touchdowns. But, how much different really is he than the guy on the end of your bench that might score 2 touchdowns next week? A lot of times there's just not that much difference between them. So if you just kind of hold yourself back from making those kind of churn moves and save the fab for where you really need it. As Billy was talking about injured teams, you got to just spend it and try to get back in contention as quickly as you can. You can't sit there and ride an injured lineup for 3 or 4 weeks because, especially in these contest leagues, the season's only 12, 13 weeks long. And, if you give away 3 or 4 weeks, you're done. So you just can't do that. You've got to spend that money. But it is a nice feeling to hold that hammer. But I'm also real good at taking my last $15 and getting 13 players out of it. So the nice thing is by the time you get down to weeks 9, 10, whatever, there's a lot of teams that have just they aren't bidding on free agents anymore. Which means it's a lot easier to get a guy for $1 or $2 if that's what you need to do. So, not my preferred way to do it, but I've certainly done it that way.
Yeah, I think you guys both have great points, and I've certainly done it both ways. It's great when you have that money in week 12, week 13. You can grab maybe a guy gets injured, you end up getting a guy you can use in the playoffs, and you also prevent your teammates who might need it, your league mates, from being able to get that guy for cheap. That's great. But I do think that I'm a sucker for week 1, and I think that when those guys pop, I don't mind spending the money to get them early. I think that when you spend money early on the waiver wire, you might get a player you can use for 10 weeks, and I think that is also an argument to be had. So I think there's different ways of doing it, and you just don't want to spend your money on the wrong guy. I mean, I think we've all made mistakes on guys. I think last year I spent a little too much on KJ Hamler in an NFFC league or two, and I think I spent a little too much on Dearness Johnson when I thought that was going to give me like maybe 3 weeks, and you get 0 out of that one. Yeah, it's so you don't want to get Dearness Johnson this year. So don't get too excited. You got to take a step back and look at it. So yeah, this has been awesome tonight, Billy. We've reached about an hour and 45 minutes at this point. We'd love to have you come back on the GOAT District.
Love to.
And this was just awesome talking shop. Dan, anything?
Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I mean, it's always fun to sit around and talk a little football with Billy. Enjoyed spending time with him in Vegas, and if you see Billy in Vegas, just come over and introduce yourself. Try to distract him while he's drafting, especially if he's drafting against me.
Especially if he's drafting against Dan in auction. Tap him on the shoulder and say hello. That'll go well, I'm sure. Yeah,
we didn't talk about that in auctions. Auction's a whole different ball game from Draft. I mean, it's a whole different game.
We're actually trying to put together an auction show. And we'd love to have you be part of it. I'm not sure when it'll go down, but more of a big picture auction strategy. We'd love to have you be part of that, because I know you and Dan have gone head to head many times, and there's a great deal of respect there. For me, I play auction in some home leagues. I don't really dip my toes too much in the FFPC, NFFC auction streets, but maybe I need to jump in there. But I'd certainly like to pick your guys' brains before I step into a high stakes auction. So we'd love to get you back on there for that, Billy.
There is the Super. There's an opening in the New York Super, Theo. The day you're coming in for the New York Super, there's an opening in the Super auction that afternoon. It opened up, so
maybe I will attend as a spectator for that one.
No,
that would be a tough one to jump into for your first one. I would definitely agree with that.
That would not go very well. That would not go very well. But we probably have about 2 hours worth of auction questions for both of you guys. So we'll save that for a later date. Billy, anything to add?
No, that'd be great about the auction thing. But it was an honor to come on here tonight. I really enjoyed talking football. I could do this for 10 hours. I really could. And but I was very privileged to come on, and thankfully you guys reached out to me, and it was a fun time, and I much respect for you guys. And the thing I love about your show, and I think I told you this, Theo, is you guys are bringing people on who have won money and done a lot of things. And this is nothing against the experts, the industry experts and those kind of people, because they do a great job as well. But I love what you guys are doing. You guys are making people better drafters because they're learning from people who have had success at this. Because, I know Dan referenced it, you referenced it. It's like, start looking at boards. Even if you're not drafting, just look at draft boards. You can learn so much, just tendencies and things. Whether you know who the player, obviously don't know who the players are most of the time, but at the same time, it's just a great thing to do, and just keep, reading everything you can and listening. But this podcast, you guys are doing a fantastic job. It's great Great
No,
podcast.
we really appreciate that, Billy. We really appreciate that. And yeah, I do appreciate you pointing that out. I think that our show has been offering a great balance between having some of the best players in the country come on and also some of the sharper analysts come on. So I think I really appreciate you saying that, and it means a lot from a player of your level. So yeah, I think that wraps us up for tonight. Thanks again to Billy for coming on.
Make sure you smash that like button.
Yeah, smash that like button, and we'll be back in the Goat District tomorrow night with John Daigle of NBC Sports Edge, and then I'm drafting another team with Andrew Schellenberg this Thursday night for Half Millie Billies. We'll be drafting the Football Guys team, so we'll be live on that one. We got the 12 spot last time. Hopefully, we get a little bit better draw. And have a great night, everybody. This was awesome. Take care.